in and around East Haven for about 6 years, on and off for about, well, no, that's not true, maybe 4 years. Yeah.
Well, we'll be interested to find out your favorite pizza place and your favorite go-to for Italian.
Geez. Definitely Sally's. Pepe's for a close second. Although it was hard to get into those places, so I usually went to Modern. And I'm thinking about trying to get some of that stuff FedExed.
Oh, yeah. It's never quite the same, is it, after you leave? Yeah. Well, you have to come back and we'll meet you down there. So.
Okay, my pleasure.
Yeah, we're about 45 minutes away in East Lyme. So. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. So I'd like to just start off a little bit by introducing Dean Auer. Dr. Matt Auer is the Dean of the School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Georgia. And he brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to both the university, the campus, as well as the entire state of Georgia. Especially right now, the limelight is directly on Georgia with the Senate runoff campaign, and the entire country is focused on the state of Georgia. And Kate Steele is the host of Stories Worth Telling, former state candidate for House in the state of Connecticut, and currently serves on the School Board of Education for East Lyme Public Schools.
And what about you, Irvin? You are an alum of the University of Georgia and went to the school. And I don't know, Dr. Lauer, were you dean at the time? I'm not sure.
I don't think so, no. I started at the School of Public and International Affairs in the fall of 2017. I think Irving was probably in China.
Okay.
I was probably overseas in China, and I was also lucky enough to go to SPIA. And one of the main reasons I actually went down to Georgia was that the University of Georgia was putting a lot of investment and focus on SPIA, and it's really turned into one of the top programs for international relations and political science throughout the entire country.
So maybe that's our first question. Dr. Auer, why is this so important? Why is international affairs so timely and critical?
Yeah, I mean, well, so between the two fields, really three, we have three departments, three academic departments, one in political science, one international affairs, and public administration and policy. And so here we are in an election year. It's so obvious why politics and political science are important. And, you know, even if you're someone who has no interest whatsoever in international affairs, and you feel like, listen, my world is really confined to my neighborhood. Well, your neighborhood is at once has the opportunity to be open to the world and also susceptible to things that are happening in the world, almost regardless of where that neighborhood is. So international affairs it permeates our lives. And then in public administration and policy, you know, the people that we train in public administration and policy are the beating heart of government with a small g, the folks who are getting the work done in the agencies and public organizations and nonprofit organizations. Meanwhile, our colleagues who are coming out of the program in international affairs, some of them are ambassadors. I interviewed an ambassador from our school last year in a program the University of Georgia has in Washington, DC called the Washington Semester Program. We have our own facility on Capitol Hill, which is really exciting. And we have 30 or so students a semester in that program. Most of them are from my school. And then the students who come out of the Department of Political Science are they are politicians and lawmakers and advocates. And just yesterday, one of them helped seal the election for President-elect Biden by serving as part of the Electoral College for the state of Georgia. Bob Trammell, who's the House Minority Leader in the General Assembly. So people are everywhere, and they're engaged directly with the very things that are happening in our lives today in public and international affairs.
Well, it sounds like you really have your pulse, your finger on the pulse of what's going on, not just in Georgia, which is critical and important. And like Irving said, really caught the attention of so many people, but also what's going on in Washington. And then, of course, what's going on internationally, because as much as we'd like to put our heads in the sand from time to time and act like some of this other doesn't matter, it really matters. And
It really does.
yeah.
You know, it occurs to me that where you are, there's a little bit north of you, but we actually have an alumnus who just got elected to the, I can't remember if it's the House or the Senate side in the state of Maine.
Oh, nice.
Maine state government. So if your university or your college has alumni who are, you know, state lawmakers in the state of Maine, you really are reaching every corner of the country. So.
And I thought that was interesting too with your background, Dr. Auer, that you spent time up in Maine and then you decided to head down to the South. And you also had an interest and passion in a similar area as me in the environment. Could you share a little bit how you transitioned from your PhD in more environmental work and into the policy area?
Sure. Yes, my PhD is in forestry and environmental studies, which is a bit of a strange match for where I am now. Most of my colleagues are political scientists. I guess for them, the part that makes sense in that equation would be my field is environmental policy, international environmental policy. Really, from an early time as an academic, I was doing public service work. And I had already knew as a student that if I became an academic, I would want to be in a school like this one, as opposed to a traditional academic department. I wanted to be engaged in work where it was just very clear that the research and scholarship that we were doing, not to mention the teaching, would translate into some kind of public service. And this is the school, really, a public service at the University of Georgia. Now, I have wonderful colleagues in other colleges and schools who would say that they have the same kind of mission. It's just in a different field, whether it's social work or public health. We're public affairs, we're international affairs, we're public administration and policy. So for me, it was always the case that I was never going to be a pure academic, always engaged in theoretical research or coming up with great new ideas. Instead, my goal pretty early on was, I think I might get more bang for my buck if I can enable lots of talented people to do that work, whether it's the scholarship or the teaching. So really, for many years now, I've been a higher ed administrator first and foremost, and an academic and a teacher secondarily. And it's hard in that, I have a passion for teaching. I love the scholarship piece, but it's very easy for me to reflect on the fact that I'm more effective if I can help my colleagues optimize what they're doing.
Well, I think what you're doing a little bit too sounds like action research to me, where you're actually kind of putting the boots on the ground and looking into different practices perhaps, and then trying to see if you can move the needle forward or in the right direction to make a difference with what's going on as far as policy and changing the minds and hearts of a number of people. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's very fair. So if you were to look at my colleagues, for example, in the Department of International Affairs, I have a colleague who is developing a set of indicators of human rights performance by different countries around the world, which is superior and is much more robust than the indicators that some of our international organizations rely on, including the United Nations. Frequently, if you're working for an intergovernmental organization, you're relying on other countries to tell you about their human rights performance. So how do you know that? How do you validate that? How do you verify that?
Right. There's nothing like going there and seeing it firsthand.
Yeah, that's right. So my colleague, whose name is Chad Clay, has developed a very sophisticated set of indicators and has a set of sources that are more robust and more heterogeneous than the sources that some countries rely on when they're developing their official indicators of human rights performance. That would be an example of something that's very action-oriented. And it's a resource that can be used by, for example, non-governmental organizations and by governments themselves, to the extent that, okay, I want to get a sense of whether this country is doing the best it can with human rights vis-a-vis this other country, because both of them are potential candidates for my country's foreign aid. That's something I would want to pay attention to. How do I know that the data I'm looking at are reliable? The data that are being produced by this, it's called the Human Rights Measurement Initiative, HRMI or HERMI, is an example of that very applied research that's really meant to promote a form of public service.
Mm-hmm. And one exciting thing too, with the emphasis on public service and with the uniqueness of the pandemic, with some of these social justice issues, as well as the Georgia runoff, I thought it was really exciting to hear how, of course, you can't be really partisan one way or another, but providing that platform in which you said encouraging your colleagues as well as the students in Athens to become engaged in the process.
Just to get people to vote, right? Just to understand the importance of being registered and being present on election day or for the election cycle.
Right. And students here, I think, would be exemplary of that mission in that very grassroots form of all the eyes are on Georgia right now with respect to the runoff. We have any number of students who are engaged in voter registration. But I have to say, even before then, they were motivated. So students here are self-selecting because if you're coming to the School of Public and International Affairs, you're probably interested in politics and public policy. The thing that's so exciting about this institution versus some others, including some peers, are the sheer number of our alumni who end up running for elected office.
Mm.
I think that's remarkable and very exciting. And it's exciting to have, among other things, a course of study here where we're telling students, you don't have to apologize if you're interested in politics and potentially running for office. One of our programs, we call it's the Applied Politics Certificate Program. Students actually roll up their sleeves and learn about what it means to be engaged in electoral politics as a profession, including as a campaign strategist, as someone who shapes messages, as someone who has to make the decision about when to buy an ad, about how to craft a long-term strategy, about how to do opposition research, about how to develop substantive policy in your communications, how you develop a team that's going to be effective, how you roll out a campaign. This program has been incredibly successful. There's a line to get in it. We can't take everyone because we want to be able to have a kind of hand-painted experience for these students, including who they engage with in class, who the professionals. It's not just taught by a professor or a couple of professors, but we have people coming in who are doing this work in the field, including members of Congress, including the governor, including people who are running campaigns. And then the students have internship experiences working on campaigns, working for incumbents or for people who are running for office.
Well, it's just such critical information. I have to tell you, we just got out of a campaign ourselves and ran for House of Representatives for the 37th district, which is East Lyme and Salem, if you're familiar, from having lived in the area, and was going against an incumbent who was going for her third term. And it was my first time with running against her. Came so close. It was about 200 votes, did well in East Lyme, our hometown, but Salem, the town over, the little north of us, I just didn't have the recognition and didn't door knock because of COVID, but sure could have used some of the strategists. We had a great team as it was, but I don't think anybody understands quite as much as we do right now, like how critical all of that information is and how important it is, because people don't know the candidates is what I found. They vote because they recognize the person's name or the other person's name or,
Right.
yeah.
Yes. So interesting. And this election was so interesting with split ballots and, what was happening down ballot in so many cases. So the psychology of the voter, I mean, such an important part of this course of study. It's taught expertly by two faculty. One, a superwoman named Audrey Haynes, who's in our school. And then this is a wonderful relationship that we have with the Grady, the College of Journalism and Mass Communication. The counterpart instructor is a professor there named Joe Watson. And between the two of them, Watson and Haynes, they're like Pied Pipers, and have managed to find wonderful internships that lead to long-term jobs for these students in electoral politics. It's been fabulous. And I don't really know very many other programs that are quite like this in the country. So
Well, it sounds wonderful.
Kate, to your remark about this is a very boots on the ground, applied kind of experience, a set of practical skills that students can translate into a passion that, becomes a job and a career for them.
Absolutely. When we had our campaign going, we had a lot of people who were working on it and tried to engage some younger people, some college students, high school students, and they were probably some of our best campaign workers. And and it's just really hard to for not to whine, but to get people engaged or to do the work that you need to do to get the job done. And it was an interesting experience in that regard.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I hope you'll stick with it and take the lessons learned maybe from this experience and try again. That's something we, of course, tell our students as well. And it's incredible. We have some students who are, I don't even know if they're 27 years old. They've already been through a campaign cycle where the first time they ran, let's say for state senate or House of Representatives, they lost, ran again, and they won. And they're still, they're in their 20s. But we have people of all ages who have run for office, or they are in appointed positions in not just in the state of Georgia, but as I mentioned, state of Maine even. So
nice.
And building off the campaign that we were just finishing in Connecticut for Mom's Race, were a lot of people who are still really excited and wanted to try and continue to be engaged, particularly in the race in Georgia. And since you have your boots on the ground, I don't know if you have any advice or suggestions for these people outside of Georgia, how they can become a little bit engaged in the current race.
I think that there are many ways, of course. What I would say to folks who come to visit and who are supporting one candidate or the other, I wouldn't dissuade them from doing it, but I would urge anyone who does to come as a participant observer, to use an expression from anthropology. Be prepared to have an experience where you can get past the headlines of your favorite go-to website or social media platform or newspaper to really learn about what's happening in the state and to discover how heterogeneous it is. And that goes for the aspirations and the values of people who are going to vote for the same candidate. So I could be a Kelly Loeffler supporter, or I could be a Raphael Warnock supporter, but those sets of supporters are not monoliths. They're not single-minded. There are different reasons for why people are supporting different candidates, and there are different issues and priorities that people have. And I think it would be an exciting opportunity for people to come and to spend time listening to it, as much as they might be advocating for a particular candidate. there's a certain amount of self-reflection people have to do about their own values. Why am I here? Maybe it's to support this candidate, maybe it's to support that candidate, but I really need to be kind of like an anthropologist and listen to this decidedly diverse group of constituents and the things that they're hoping for when they pull the lever or touch the screen, as the case may be.
Oh, here we fill in a little bubble. Yeah, so what I noticed when I watched the debate between Kelly and Raphael is how Kelly seemed to have kind of a pat response for a lot of what she said. And I don't know if you'd call that rhetoric, but she, for whatever question or for whatever statement, it was pretty much the same canned response, I felt. And just wondering, how do people know beyond that? Like how can you really get to know that person if kind of their responses are just these responses that you can almost predict after you've speak on one occasion?
Right. So this I think also merges a little bit with Irving's question before, which is how do you serve as an instructor or a teacher, let's say in political science, or let's say political communication, or in the applied politics program without being partisan, in terms of critiquing, let's say, the performance. To the extent that we might critique one candidate or the other, it would be against a set of principles that are coming out of, let's say, a literature or a methodology for political communication. In the case of Kelly Loeffler, for example, it's very clear that one of the things that emerges from her performance is that she's, as you will, she's staying on message. Mm-hmm. It's very important for candidates in, the craft of electoral politics to create an impression with the electorate about them and what they stand for, and also to describe their opponent. And you can say what you will about President Trump or aspiring President Trump in 2016 at the time he's a candidate, but it was easier for him to describe to the electorate Hillary Clinton, and he, I think, arguably was more successful at that than he was with Joe Biden. There were just some things that the Trump campaign tried, they didn't really stick. They tried something else. It was just difficult to do that. It was hard, for example, to paint Joe Biden as a socialist. It just wasn't as convincing. Now, in this campaign, it's very clear that the campaign experts for both Loeffler and Perdue do see traction in that message because they're using it repeatedly in their ads. So they've locked onto that. That's something that's coming through focus groups. It's coming through by listening to people in the party that rank and file about things that they're concerned about, and it seems to stick. It didn't stick particularly well with respect to Joe Biden, but we'll see what happens with John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. It's clear that they're hanging on to that message, and yes, Senator Loeffler did use a set of expressions over and over about socialism or radical politics, et cetera. So, but we, in my school, we could point to that as an example of textbook strategy for political communication and specifically for electoral politics.
Mm-hmm. Such great information and such a great way for people to understand how to impact and make a difference in the policy and practices, and eventually what's happening at our house, in your house, and in each neighborhood, the way we started.
Yeah.
And maybe on a little bit softer tone was that you spent a little bit of time in Connecticut and I believe at Yale as well on campus there. So I wanted to hear your thoughts along those lines, that some people make the comparison between Athens, Georgia, the beautiful campus that we have there, and then the campus in Yale.
Yeah. You know, they're both, there's some things they have in common, to be sure. I think of Athens more as being more of a college town, frankly, than even New Haven. New Haven strikes me as a place where the economy is a bit more economically diverse. That is to say, there's more industry. It has the feel of a northeastern town that hosts a major elite private university. Whereas Athens, this quality of the University of Georgia in Athens and the culture of Athens seems to be much more bound up with the university.
Mm-hmm.
Number of people here who stay here after they've graduated because of the spirit of Athens, the culture of Athens is a bit different from New Haven. I don't know that many folks who graduated from Yale and I decided to stay in New Haven for the long term. I certainly know some folks, but they tend to be, they're academics at Yale,
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to people who stayed in the community to do different things. So in some ways, the University of Georgia, as part of the psyche or the gestalt of the place, has been, I think, arguably more successful with Athens than Yale has with New Haven. Now, Yale has made lots of investments in New Haven, particularly in and around the campus. And there's been a very strong relationship, I think, in many ways constructive between the university and New Haven over time. It's developed out of what really was a crisis in the late 80s and early 1990s. And I think, things have clearly gotten better with Town Gown. But the spirit of the place is still, well, there's Yale. I mean, it's, there are other examples of this, I think, nationally, where there's this private institution, it's quite wealthy, and then there's New Haven, and New Haven at some level is reflects some of the wealth and good fortune of Yale, but that kind of affinity and warm feeling that you have here between the University of Georgia and Athens in terms of the many people who stay here to make their lives here is really indelible in ways that maybe it's not so much so in New Haven. Now I'll probably never get invited back to New Haven.
Oh, that's not true. I went to a Jesuit school in Nebraska, Omaha, and I think Jesuit schools are always famous for being in areas or neighborhoods where it's surrounded downtown kind of thing. And sometimes the residents close by are people who are not necessarily the wealthiest or the most have the most resources available to them. But that does bring up a point to me that I'm thinking of. When Irving was in school down at the University of Georgia, immediately he got involved with the Big Brothers program. So I think by the same token, there's lots of opportunities to kind of stretch yourself outside of that comfort zone and do that social service type of work. And I think that whatever, opportunity or whatever situation you find yourself placed in, you find yourself almost with an opportunity to try to make a difference. And
completely agree. And in that way, New Haven and Athens have quite a bit in common, and the relationship of the university to the town in the form of a kind of entrepreneurial spirit among the students, a real passion for being in the community and working with the community in genuine partnership. That would be true in New Haven as well as Athens. And I should clarify that Athens is not a rich city. We have many people here who are struggling. That would be true of New Haven as well. And so it's all the more important for students, particularly in schools like mine, to be engaged with the community directly. So both of those institutions, I think, are trying to maximize those opportunities for students, and also create a rich kind of partnership and engagement with the community, where there's real co-authorship of whatever work it is that they're doing together.
Which is so critical. But you both had bulldogs, is that right?
Yes, that's true.
But there's
One is
nothing
blue.
there's nothing like Uga, right?
Yeah, that's right. Uga, yes,
Uga,
Uga.
sorry.
Uga the bulldog. Yes, and the colors are certainly different. Who knows? Maybe someday. I'm trying to think of what sport they could conceivably engage in. We have to find some Division I sports.
Maybe badminton.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
Yeah. Well, we know your time's very limited, Dean Auer, and we appreciate you taking the time to share your leadership and expertise at SPIA and the state of Georgia with us today. Was there any last thing that potentially we or other people in the community can do to help you and help SPIA and the University of Georgia right now?
How can we support you?
Well, of course, I would love to have both of you and your friends and colleagues to serve as a potential set of recruiters for us for the best students. I would love it if more students from Connecticut and New England generally were setting their sights on the School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Georgia and the University of Georgia generally. Of course, we have wonderful students who are coming to us from states in the Northeast, to be sure, but if you guys could be a special pipeline to us, and for students who are really interested in that, as you were saying, Kate, a kind of action-oriented, a very tangible, hands-on type of experience with their education, this is a great place to do that.
Perfect. We'd love that. Conversely, we're looking for educators who could work in our school systems, who are people of color. So if you know anybody who would like to have nice mild summers and barbecue that's a different flavor, and
yes, it is. Yeah.
what do we have up here, Irv, to offer?
Beautiful shoreline.
Dunkin' Donuts, yes. and Sally's Pizza. I guess we have to take them to New Haven for that.
They're all the possibilities there with the pizza are great. I was just giving you my top tier, but yes, no, that sounds wonderful. And we have a terrific college, the Mary Frances Early College of Education here. So we could help you both from the K to 12 all the way up to higher ed in terms of populating schools there.
That'd be great, because we're looking right now, that's really actually one of our initiatives on racial diversity, equity, and inclusion, is to have more people of color, and we're trying to be more aware of microaggressions and things, bias and racism as a topic in general, but specifically trying to address some of those things. So that would be.
I will just mention also, just in closing, that I believe the University of Georgia, I don't believe there's any other research one institution in the US that graduates more PhDs, PhDs of color, particularly African-American.
Lovely.
I'll have to fact check that, but I know we're in the very top tier. So that's something we'll have to engage then in our two-way pipeline.
Very good.
Work to do going forward. Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed being with you this.
Thank you so much. It was nice to meet you. Good luck to you. Enjoy the rest of the campaign season, and Happy New Year.
Yes, thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye now.